There are moments in sports that refuse to stay inside the lines of the playing field, moments that spill over into something bigger, into politics, into history, into the kind of raw human emotion that no press conference or government statement could ever manufacture. June 30th, 2026, at the Estadio Azteca in Mexico City, was one of those moments. Iran's national soccer team had just been eliminated from the World Cup. Not by a loss, not even by their own performance, but by a last-second goal in a match they never played. A 3-3 draw between Austria and Algeria, decided in the 6th minute of stoppage time, sent the Iranians home. And yet what happened on that pitch after the final whistle in their own last game against Egypt? A 1-1 draw that should have been enough will be talked about long after the tournament scores are forgotten. The Iranian players didn't rush to the locker room. They walked to the center of the field together and they unrolled a banner. 4 words in Spanish. Gracias México, corazón del mundo. Thank you, Mexico, heart of the world. The Azteca crowd, tens of thousands of Mexican fans who had come to cheer for the beautiful game, erupted. Not in the way crowds erupt when a goal goes in. They erupted in something harder to describe, something between gratitude and disbelief that an opposing, eliminated team would stop to say thank you at the worst moment of their sporting lives. Iran's captain, Mehdi Taremi, had tears running down his face. He walked to the stands and exchanged jerseys, not with an opponent, but symbolically with the Mexican crowd itself. To understand what this moment really means, you have to understand what Iran went through just to be on that field at all. This was, without any exaggeration, the most politically complicated World Cup campaign in the history of the tournament. FIFA itself has acknowledged that this is the first time in the competition's 96-year history that a host nation and a participating nation were actively in a state of conflict during the event. The United States, one of the 3 co-hosts alongside Mexico and Canada, and Iran were not just diplomatically estranged. They were, by any reasonable definition, on opposite ends of an active geopolitical crisis that had already cost lives. It very nearly didn't happen at all. Back in March of 2026, Iran's Minister of Sports, Ahmad Donyamali, announced that the country would not participate in the tournament. The reason was devastating. U.S. and Israeli airstrikes had killed Iran's supreme leader, Ayatollah Ali Khamenei, plunging the country into mourning and political chaos. Considering that this corrupt regime has assassinated our leader, Donyamali said on state television, under no circumstances can we participate in the World Cup. It seemed final. Iran was gone. But then somehow they came back. Months of behind-the-scenes negotiations, FIFA pressure, and the sheer will of the players and the Iranian Football Federation reversed the decision. The team would compete. What followed was a logistical nightmare that tested every limit of what it means to host a global sporting event while maintaining basic human dignity for all participants. The United States denied visas to 15 members of the Iranian Football Federation, including Mahdi Mohamed Nabi, who had overseen the national team at both the 2018 World Cup in Russia and 2022 in Qatar. The State Department's official justification was that the Iranian delegation might, quote, exploit this system to bring terrorists into the U.S. under false pretenses. The Iranian Football Federation's president, Mehdi Taj, called it exactly what it was, a political decision, not a security one. We have told FIFA President Infantino that this is purely a political stance, Taj said publicly, and FIFA must tell the United States to stop this behavior. FIFA, for its part, said very little. Gianni Infantino, the FIFA president who had built his reputation on big promises and even bigger smiles, held a press conference in Mexico City on the eve of the tournament. A Somali referee named Abdul Qadir Artan had just been banned from entering the United States despite holding a valid visa. The U.S. government cited alleged ties to terror organizations. FIFA quietly removed him from the officiating roster. When journalists pressed Infantino on Iran's situation, on the visa denials, on the systematic exclusion of federation officials from a tournament FIFA was supposed to control, his response was staggering. He told reporters to chill and relax. He said FIFA was a sports organization, not the kings of the world. He said there were matters we are informed about and others we are not. President Trump, meanwhile, made his own position clear. His administration was making sure only the right people were allowed in for the World Cup. So, Iran's team qualified for their 7th consecutive World Cup, ranked among the top teams in Asia, with genuine ambitions of advancing past the group stage for the first time in their history, was forced to relocate their training base from Arizona to Tijuana, Mexico. At the last moment, they would train in Tijuana, cross the border to play their matches in Los Angeles and Seattle, then return to Mexico. Each crossing was a logistical negotiation. Each match was played under conditions that no other team in the tournament faced, and they did it quietly, professionally, with their heads held up. That is why the banner at the Azteca matters so much, because Tijuana is just across the border from San Diego. Because while the United States was building barriers, legal, bureaucratic, diplomatic, Mexico was opening doors. Mexico gave Iran a home when the co-host of the tournament refused them dignified access. The Iranian team spent more time on Mexican soil than on American soil during the entire World Cup. And when it was over, when the cruelest possible math had eliminated them by one single spot in the standings, the 9th best third-place team when only 8 advanced, they turned to Mexico and said thank you. The story of Iran at this World Cup is a story about what happens when sports collide with politics at maximum velocity. Iran finished Group G with 3 draws against Belgium, against New Zealand, against Egypt. 3 draws, 0 losses, 3 points, and a goal differential of 0. In any other group, that might have been enough. In this expanded 48-team format, the 8 best third-place teams advanced to the round of 32. Iran needed to be among those 8. They were 9th. The elimination itself was brutal in its timing and mechanics. On Friday, June 27th, Iran appeared to have scored a last-minute winner against Egypt that would have sent them through. VAR ruled it offside, a call that Iranian players and coaching staff protested bitterly. Then on Saturday night, Iran watched Algeria surge ahead of Austria 3-2 in stoppage time, which would have put the Iranians through on tiebreakers. Iran's players were reportedly celebrating in their Tijuana base camp. Then, in the 6th minute of stoppage time, Austria equalized. 3-3, Iran was out. Captain Taremi, who had been one of the quiet leaders of an entire generation of Iranian football, did not stay silent afterward. He directed his remarks at FIFA, at Infantino specifically, about the visa denials, about the broken promises, about what it meant to navigate a World Cup where your own host country treated you as a threat. His words were measured but unmistakable. "We came here to play football," Taremi said. Like, what happened off the pitch was not football. The broader geopolitical context of 2026 cannot be separated from what unfolded at this World Cup. The months leading into the tournament were among the most turbulent in recent memory for U.S.-Iran relations. The killing of Khamenei by U.S.-Israeli strikes triggered not only Iran's initial withdrawal announcement, but also a cascade of regional escalations that reshaped the security calculations of every country in the Middle East. By the time Iran reversed its decision and chose to participate in the World Cup, the country was navigating this enormous grief and political uncertainty alongside the surreal task of preparing for soccer matches in cities controlled by the government that launched those strikes. Some Iranian commentators and fans back home questioned whether it made sense to participate at all, whether playing in Los Angeles, even under protest conditions, was a form of normalization. Others argued the opposite, that showing up, competing with dignity, and refusing to be erased from the world's biggest stage was itself a powerful act of resistance and national pride. The players, to their credit, never made the tournament about anything other than football when they were on the pitch. Offit, Taremi, and others spoke carefully but honestly about the conditions they faced. That balance between professionalism and principle was its own quiet kind of courage. It is also worth noting that the U.S. government's so-called FIFA Pass executive action, which was supposed to streamline World Cup-related travel for nationals of restricted countries, was widely criticized by immigration attorneys and sports governance experts for inconsistent implementation. Iran was the only team at this entire 48-nation tournament to face substantial and documented visa denials for federation members, not just for general fans or journalists. That distinction matters. It means that the people responsible for the team's day-to-day operations, medical staff, analysts, federation administrators, were systematically excluded from doing their jobs at a tournament their team had qualified for honestly and transparently. Now here is where this story becomes about something much larger than soccer, because what Iran experienced at this World Cup is, in a very specific way, a mirror held up to the entire geopolitical moment we are living through in 2026. The United States co-hosting this tournament was always a political statement as much as a sporting one. The slogan was, "We are 26." The vision, according to FIFA and the American Organizing Committee, was a celebration of global unity. But the reality was a tournament where the host nation denied visas to officials from a qualified team, barred referees from entry, and imposed bond requirements on visitors from nations with high overstay rates. Critics were already calling it one of the least accessible World Cups in modern history before the first ball was kicked. FIFA's inability or unwillingness to push back against the U.S. government's decisions has drawn intense scrutiny from governance analysts, human rights organizations, and former players alike. Historical precedents show that FIFA has, in the past, actively negotiated visa access in politically sensitive situations. In 2022 in Qatar, FIFA pushed aggressively on LGBTQ fan access. In 2010 in South Africa, FIFA worked closely with the government to ensure logistical equity. In 2026, facing the world's most powerful government with its biggest financial partner in the room, FIFA told everyone to relax. The contrast with Mexico could not be sharper. While the political theater was playing out north of the border, Mexico was quietly running what many observers are calling the most humanly successful portion of the tournament. The organizational excellence at Mexican venues has surprised even skeptical international observers who came in with low expectations shaped by years of negative headlines. The infrastructure projects that Mexico undertook ahead of this tournament, stadium upgrades, transportation networks, hospitality frameworks, came in ahead of schedule and under the kind of scrutiny that global sporting events inevitably attract. And they passed. More importantly, something less measurable but equally real has been happening throughout the 6 weeks of this tournament. Mexico has been building a different kind of international reputation, not through press releases, not through diplomatic summits, through the day-to-day experience of welcoming the world. Delegations from nations across Africa, Asia, the Middle East, and Latin America have spoken publicly about the warmth of their reception in Mexican cities. Fans who came with concerns about safety and logistics left with stories about generosity and hospitality. This is what political scientists call soft powers, and right now Mexico is deploying it at a scale that is getting noticed in Washington, Brussels, and Beijing. This matters in ways that extend Well beyond sport, Mexico has been at the center of intense political pressure from the United States for years over immigration, over trade, over security cooperation. The USMCA renegotiation has been contentious. President Trump has repeatedly used Mexico as a political target in ways that served domestic audiences but strained the bilateral relationship. And yet at the same moment when those pressures were most intense, Mexico went and organized the most emotionally resonant portion of the biggest sporting event on earth. The country's ability to separate the political noise from the practical work of engaging the world on human terms is becoming a genuine strategic asset. The international business community has taken note. In the months leading up to the tournament, several major technology and manufacturing companies accelerated nearshoring decisions, moving production facilities closer to the U.S. market with Mexico as the primary destination. The economic logic was already strong before the World Cup. Now, there is a reputational layer on top of it. Mexico is stable. Mexico is capable. Mexico is the kind of place where Iranians and Mexicans can share tears on a soccer field, despite living in completely different geopolitical realities. The UN, the World Economic Forum, and dozens of bilateral trade partners have reaffirmed cooperation with Mexico in 2026 on projects ranging from renewable energy to aerospace manufacturing. These are not feel-good gestures. These are real economic decisions made by people who look at data, at political risk assessments, at infrastructure capability, and at the human capital available in a country. The data keeps pointing in the same direction. And this World Cup, paradoxically, has served as a live demonstration of Mexican organizational capacity at global scale. What Iran's thank you banner also exposes, though perhaps unintentionally, is the growing divergence between what powerful nations say and what they actually do when the world is watching. The United States said this World Cup was about unity. FIFA said this World Cup was about the beautiful game transcending borders. Iran arrived prepared to play, trained in Tijuana because they had no other choice, crossed the border with reduced delegations for each match, and then watched a last-second goal in a game involving other teams decide their fate. And they still found it in themselves at the worst moment to thank the country that actually treated them with dignity. That gap between the rhetoric of unity and the practice of exclusion is one of the defining tensions of this political moment globally. It is visible in how the current U.S. administration approaches immigration, in how FIFA navigates relationships with authoritarian hosts, in how international institutions balance commercial interests against foundational principles. Mexico's quiet, consistent excellence throughout this tournament is one answer to that tension, not a perfect answer, not a complete one, but a real one. There are questions worth asking about what comes next. The World Cup ends on July 19th, 2026, with the final at MetLife Stadium in East Rutherford, New Jersey. When the lights go down and the trophy is lifted, the political questions that this tournament surfaced will not disappear. Iran will return home to a country still processing profound internal upheaval. The assassination of Khamenei triggered a wave of instability whose full consequences are still unfolding. The Iranian Football Federation, having navigated the most difficult World Cup campaign in history, will face questions about the future direction of the national program and its relationship with global institutions. FIFA will face its own reckoning. The optics of an organization that asks the world to unite around football while shrugging at visa denials for federation officials have not gone unnoticed. The governing body has been under sustained scrutiny since the corruption scandal era of the previous decade, and every press conference where Infantino tells reporters to chill and relax while qualified officials are denied entry chips away at whatever credibility FIFA has rebuilt since those days. If the biggest tournament in history, with record revenues from broadcast rights and ticket sales, cannot guarantee basic dignity of access for all participants, the question of what FIFA is actually for becomes very difficult to avoid. And Mexico will continue. the country that spent the last several years being discussed primarily through the lens of U.S. political battles, that was constantly framed as a problem to be managed rather than a partner to be respected, has used this moment to write a different story, not loudly, not through confrontation, through competence, through hospitality, through the kind of consistent, unsexy, deeply impressive work of actually doing what you said you would do when the whole world is watching. The economic cycle that this reputation building feeds is real and measurable. International confidence generates foreign direct investment. Investment generates internal growth. Growth strengthens diplomatic positioning. And stronger diplomatic positioning gives Mexico a seat at tables where decisions about trade, security, climate, and technology are made. Every corner of that cycle was on display during this World Cup. When Iran's players stood at the center of the Azteca with their banner, they were not making a statement about soccer. They were making a statement about something that the political establishments of the most powerful countries in the world have been struggling to deliver: basic human decency at scale. They were saying that they noticed that in a tournament defined by access denied, paperwork rejected, and bureaucratic cruelty dressed up as security policy, one country remembered that the people playing the games are just that, people. Mehdi Taremi, 34 years old, a forward for Inter Milan, one of the finest strikers of his generation, stood in front of Mexican fans in a stadium that has hosted more World Cup history than almost any venue on earth, and he cried. Not because his team lost. They didn't lose. They drew 3 times. They drew against Belgium, they drew against New Zealand, they drew against Egypt, and they were eliminated anyway by mathematics they had no power over. He cried because after everything, after the visa fights, after the relocation to Tijuana, after the political pressure, after the death of their supreme leader, turning the entire journey into something that barely seemed possible, someone had been kind to them. And in 2026, that turns out to be extraordinary enough to make grown men weep on international television. The world is watching Mexico differently now. That is not a small thing. That is, in the long run, exactly the kind of soft power dividend that shapes alliances, attracts investment, and builds the kind of international trust that press releases and photo ops can never manufacture. The game ended. The banner went up. The crowd roared. And somewhere in the gap between the political world that tried to make this tournament about fear and division and the human world that responded with tears and gratitude, something worth paying attention to happened. Iran found a home in Mexico at the worst possible moment. And Mexico, without making any speeches about it, proved that hospitality is its own kind of geopolitical strategy, and one that, right now, is working.